and what I click continue.
No,
And
sorry about that. Sorry about that.
sorry. And they started telling my story, because I wasn't the typical person on the street. I was very outspoken. I had a formal education. I was doing my best to try to get out of the situation, and it almost worked against us, because of the fact that I didn't have a criminal record, that I didn't have, all these other underlying issues, and that I did have formal education. I was often put at the bottom of the list as far as those to help. I was seen as someone who wasn't a priority, which made it harder, as I'd apply for different things, try to get housing, and we'd always be put on the back burner. Um, it really wasn't until my story was brought to light by CNN. Dan Simon, one of the journalists, was looking for someone to demonstrate that the people on the street aren't who you think they are. And this came after President Trump had made a statement that the homeless were desecrating his Hollywood and all need to be gathered together and put in an armory in Modesto. So the very next day after that, Dan Simon came out and did an interview. And I had been recommended by one of the people with Koreatown for All. And that interview set in motion, um, I guess, a whole series of things that I had no idea about. Um, he was quite intrusive. Everything from my addictions to survival of how you live from day to day, showing the encampment, showing my, the squalor in which we lived. And after doing the interview, I was extremely remorseful. Um, he had wanted me to contact him and to stay in touch, and that was the last thing I wanted to do. I just wanted to hide. I couldn't believe I'd brought such shame upon my family, upon my friends, or all who've known me, upon my college, upon, I really felt like I had just represented the worst of what they could expect. Um, However, that next day, just the opposite happened. After the story ran, people started coming by, people I didn't know, bringing gifts, bringing kind words, wanting to just, let me know that they were aware of me. Um, Oddly enough, the very first people there that the next morning were the police. A squad car came and nearly pulled up on the curb, and guy hops out and starts yelling my name and telling me to come out, come out. And I'm like freaking out. I don't know what's going on. I come out of my tent and he points, there he is, there he is. That's the guy right there, Shawn. I arrested him a couple of times. Yeah, you were just on CNN. We just saw you at the transfer station where we were. And he had three other officers in his car, and they wanted autographs. So I signed autographs for them, and I'm going, wow, isn't this a turn of events? The people who used to harass me, write me tickets for having a tent up after 6:01 in the morning, are here trying to get an autograph.
Um,
And the day just went from there. Um, Eventually, someone from Yale came by to visit me. This woman, Kim Hirschman, who I'd met a few times while she was a year ahead of me. And she said that her girlfriends had seen the story and told her there was this black young man, near her class who had been on the news this morning, and you know, was anyone trying to help him? So she took it upon herself to come out and see if I was getting any help. And she sat there with me and she asked me, she said, "What do you need?" Um, of all the people who came by for the weeks that followed that, she was the only one who asked me what I needed. Um, it was wonderful that others were offering me things, but like I said, no one asked me what I needed.
Wow,
And
that's really powerful.
it really changed the whole narrative. She said, whatever it is that you need, I will help you obtain. She said, even if you just want to stay here on the street, and she said, and that's it, and you just want a friend to come by and talk to you every now and then, I'll do that. If you need food, I'll do that. If you want to go to rehab for your addiction,
Mm,
I'll do that. If you want to try to find housing, I'll do that. Um, I told her I wanted all. I was greedy. And strangely enough, she delivered. She helped me reach all of
wow.
those just by
Wow.
being there and listening. We made a plan, and within 21 days, she had me off of the street. We'd been on the streets for 10 years at that point. I had tried down the housing road 8 different times and failed each time. And with the persistence of this one woman fighting the system, because at every turn, there was some obstacle, some systemic obstacle in the way, blocking our progress. We're doing all the right things, but there would still always be some problem. And at some point, I had assembled a team that included 3 Yale lawyers and myself. So we have 4 Yaleys.
Look
And
at that.
and the problem is, I don't know of any other homeless people who have such a team to get themselves off the street. So at the same time that I felt privileged, I also felt really bad for those around me, because it took a lot of work for the 4 of us to figure this out. And we're still figuring it out. What do regular people do? What does everyone else do who don't have a network of friends? And mine was, came upon me quite surprising, and I wasn't expecting it. But you know, I'm very thankful for it. But at the same time, it made me turn around and say, there's a serious problem here. It wasn't just me. That wasn't the reason I'm stuck. Everyone's stuck here, and the problem's got to be much
Absolutely.
worse for them. Um, Now here I am at this point. I've been through rehab at Tarzana Treatment Center. I did their detox residential program, their sober living, their transitional housing program. I'm in my own apartment, and actually, um, it was it will be a year on June 1st that I've had my own place. There's a lot of anniversaries there. Today is the 18th anniversary of myself and my husband. But it's been a long journey. And at this point, I have decided in my life that um, I needed to do something about the situation. So I've been doing my best to offer myself up wherever I can as a volunteer, as on different committees and boards, to speak to the issues and problems that I ran into in trying to exit homelessness, so that we can try to make it a easier path for others. And I've dedicated my life to that at this point. This is what I do.
Yeah.
This is what I'm about. It's a complete about face from where I was before. It was about making money. It was about Wall Street. It was about having my own company and doing, and my own, it was about me. And now it's about
Mm,
everyone else. It's about, helping the less fortunate, helping those who aren't of the privilege that I had. It's about trying to change things, trying to change the system. It shouldn't be this hard, and it doesn't have to be this hard, plain and simple.
I agree. I completely agree. Well, thank you for taking us on this journey of sort of where you, and I think, just listening to what you were sharing, I think there were some really key highlights that I saw, that you realized that there was a mental health crisis that brought on sort of some of the spiraling that you talked about, losing your mother, and then, well, losing your sister, and then losing your mother, sort of just surfaced everything that sometimes we don't know how to deal with it, right? Like, those are life instances in our life that just shift us and changes,
Right.
and it shapes us differently.
And we don't we
And
don't we don't know how we're going to respond or react to them until they happen. I
right.
would have never have thought that her passing would have such a tremendous impact on my desire to even exist. But it
Yeah.
did. And I often look, everyone has some unique story of trauma, of life circumstance, or
Yeah.
that may have contributed or landed them where they
Yeah.
are. And I don't mean to sound callous, but in the big picture, that doesn't matter. What matters is making them whole from this point. Meeting them where they
Absolutely.
are, figuring out what it is they need, trying to build them and put them back together. Um,
Absolutely.
there are many issues. I had health issues. I'm HIV positive. I was on the street as a gay person. I'm an older adult. I had mental health issues. I had addiction issues. All these things had to be addressed. You can't just throw someone in a housing situation and expect them to survive. All those have to be taken care of as
Absolutely.
well. And I've been fortunate
Yeah.
that I've had, like I said, a team of people working
Yeah.
around me that have helped me
That
address all of those issues. And that's why I'm still
absolutely.
housed. That's why I'm still doing well. That's why I'm thriving, is because all those things have been taken into account. Now, with that said, in my opinion, once I was housed, all those other issues were so much easier to address. Those are things that there's nothing you can really do when someone's still on the street or in a shelter.
There's no stability, right?
There's no
That's what
stability.
I always think, and you and I have had
Housing
conversations about
first.
like the housing first approach, right?
Yes.
And I think one time you said it's not just like a slogan, right? It has to be a real thing that you're able to rebuild and come back to yourselves and be whole again, right? And I think you mentioned earlier, that sort of uh, that you felt shame from first telling your story, but that in itself also brought the change, right? That's what really, that was
Yes.
the point,
Exactly.
that everything shifted, that you felt shame, but
Right.
in turn, your story was
Right.
helping shift others' perspective on
The, the very
who
the
we
very
see every day on
the
the
very
streets.
yeah, the very thing that I was ashamed of, the very thing that was holding me down is the same thing that set me free. Like telling that story and
Absolutely.
sharing it with someone.
Absolutely.
Um,
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
of the things that the woman who helped me out had said was that she often would walk down the street where we were on, to go get her hair done, but she never looked down all
Wow.
those years. And
Yeah.
so one thing I would tell people is notice who's around you, pay attention, say hello. um, Maybe they'll greet you in a nice way, maybe they won't, because although we all have bad days, let me tell you something, homeless people have a lot more bad days than the rest of us. So don't take it
Yeah.
personally if you don't get the smile you want back, but still say hello, because it
Yeah.
lets us know that we exist. And that was one of the worst feelings in the world, is sometimes, so often, people would, walking down the sidewalk, look the other way the entire time as if we didn't exist. And if
Yeah.
you said anything to them, they would just ignore it, you were an invisible person. And that's worse than, I'd rather you told me to get the hell out of there, or express your anger, than to say nothing at all, because then at least
Yeah.
I know I'm there, you know.
Yeah.
So that's
That's
one
really
thing I would say
powerful. You're
is,
right.
and I we made some really, well, we met some really good people from those who did look, you know, and made some lasting friendships that even today I will go back to the area where I used to be homeless, and just to say hello to those neighbors who were friendly and helped in the process, because I want them to know that it made a difference. I want them to know that their kindness mattered. Be it, we had one neighbor, she'd come out and just let us know if it was going to rain or not. It's going to rain. Is
That's
anyone,
sweet.
get your
It's like
tarps
your little
together.
own little
Yes.
weather
But it
forecaster.
was so wonderful because she cared. And so she'd come down and tell
Yeah.
us it was going to rain, and she didn't want anyone to get wet and didn't want us to be colder than necessary. Does anyone need anything? It's going to rain. Um,
And I think that's what we're trying to build, with these types of conversations. Are like, what are the things that we can all do, right?
yeah.
Simple things. And you just gave us a whole list of, as somebody is experiencing homelessness,
And
the simple things. They don't have to be like, I'm going to go
right.
on the
You,
march, or like,
right,
it could
right.
be start where you are. Start with your neighbors that are maybe down the
Yeah.
street, and just say a simple
Just
hello, bring some water, I imagine,
right.
right?
Just
I mean,
or bring
our work, we're trying to do big things, right? We're trying to do
or
transformative policies that will bring the resources we need, countywide. But like, there's simple things that we could do as well.
And some of the, I said, some of the things you can bring are, you always have on you. Bring a smile, bring some hope, bring some dignity, bring some respect, bring a little conversation, and those things are so few and far between when you're homeless and on the street, and they're so easy to bring. We all have them, and it just amazes me, just bring some humanity.
Yeah, yeah. At the beginning of this conversation, I reminded everyone to do that, to bring their humanity to this discussion,
Yeah.
because I think it's so important. Especially, you also said that the woman, the attorney who helped you, asked you what you needed, and that's really where you said things really shifted, right? In 21 years, in 21 days, you were already like on your path to
Yes.
transform your situation. And I think, and then having a team, it's like, those are the pieces, right? It's like making sure we see people's humanity, ask them what you need, and then build a team to
And
get
that was a very tough transition to make. You hear people talk about housing resistance or service resistant and so forth and so on. If you want to use those terms, I had been that way up to that point, and I'll tell you why. So many promises are broken when you're trying to get off the street. So many dreams are shattered. So many times your hope is lost. That when someone comes up and says, "Oh, I'm going to help you get housing," you just go, "Yeah, whatever. I'm not interested." Because all that's going to happen, and like I said, until that one time, I went down the road about 8 times before it happened, and it actually worked over those 10 years. But so many times that path ends in me getting hurt. It ends in suddenly total failure, and the other person gets to walk away and go back home to wherever they live. And I'm left there with this whole dream and this whole hope that I was going to get off the street and this is going to work and they're going to help me out. And it's just shattered. And I still have to figure out how I'm going to eat today. I have to figure out how I'm going to keep someone from stealing my stuff today. I'm going to have to figure out, how to deal with the police who are coming to take my things and move me. All those issues are still there every single day. I have to do what most people do once a month, which is maybe, plan out how they're going to live. We have to plan out how we live every single day, all day long, because everything is changing. Where you can be, where you can't be, the other people who are suddenly around you or your neighbors that you can't control, police visits or sweeps by sanitation, coming to take all your things or so forth and so on. Everything is in motion all the time. You never get any rest, and it's really a tough situation. You're so often in survival mode that you can't even think about the future. You can't think about something other than being in that survival mode, because if you do, then you will suddenly lose something, your health, your things. You'll be subject to violence. Something will happen if you stop for a second to try to think about and daydream about the future. There's just no time for it.
no
and
time for dreaming, right? Just
no time
doing,
for dreaming.
maybe.
Yeah, and I think, getting back to the other part, people have to remember that every person out there on the street is somebody's brother, somebody's sister, somebody's mother, somebody's grandchild, somebody's grandfather, somebody's friend. We all are connected to somebody, and we've been disconnected. We didn't just come out of nowhere. We all are somebody's family, somebody's friend, and we all need help.
Absolutely. I think, I'm sure, we do a lot of workshops, and we did a lot of in-person, and then we transitioned to virtual workshops where we would ask that, state that, all of us probably have been, one paycheck away from being homeless, or we have
Yes.
experience, housing instability, maybe couch surfing. We've had people who work directly with us that did experience those things, and you do the work, you walk different because you've lived with that experience, and you sort of can, where the gaps are and where, some of the challenges are, and that can help you, that you've seen it, right? So all of us do the work with a little bit more intention, even if we haven't directly lived, have the lived experience.
And there's a lot of shame that goes with being homeless, on not just for the homeless, but for the families and the friends and the acquaintances of those who are homeless. And that needs to be addressed on both sides. So oftentimes, there people are disconnected because they're ashamed to have a friend who's homeless, and that friend is ashamed to reach out to them because they are homeless. It really creates some awful mental health issues, that self-esteem issues, and empowerment issues, where people have been pushed away from one another, by the stigmas that society has, rather than turning around and saying, oh, wait a minute, my friend needs my help right now. Instead, people are taught to push them away. They're taught to cut them out of their life because they're afraid for their own well-being, that somehow this is contagious and is going to bring them down, rather than embracing and saying, what do you need? How can I help you? And it's a tough situation.
Absolutely. Um, yeah, and I think you've shared many instances, but what would you say was like one of the like greatest hurdle that you had to go through seeking assistance, sort of in where you were? I think I've heard, maybe the shame was like you telling your story was what brought light to you, but that in itself sort of made you feel shameful about how you were living your life, or the
Well,
situation you were in. But what was sort of the greatest hurdle, I guess, to overcome that shame? Maybe that's a better way to state that.
um, well, probably the hardest thing was keeping hope going, or even trusting that it can be done. When I first became homeless, um, we lived in our car, and we travel and stay near people we knew, and maybe try to pop in, take a shower or whatever. And there was this denial that we're not really homeless, we're just in between places, you know. So we lived in this denial for a while. Then after that, when the city eventually ended up taking our car, I had a handicap placard taped to the front windshield, but they would still write parking tickets. And you go down and dispute them, and they would always tell you the same thing. Well, we have to believe the parking attendant. If they said they didn't see one, they didn't see one. And I've got a picture of the car showing that the placard is permanently taped to the windshield. Well, it must not have been there. It must not have been there when they came by. Well, you would see you would see the residue from the duct tape if it had been removed, and you don't, do you? But it was a useless argument. So car eventually got taken away, and then we lived literally on the street. We would, started, and we tried not to get comfortable. So we purposely would only use tarps or blankets to cover ourselves, and would just literally just crash on the street. Our thinking was that if we didn't allow ourselves to get comfortable, we would keep looking for ways to get off the street. As soon as we got too comfortable and had too many amenities, we would lose that desire or that fight to get off the street. So we resisted tents, we resisted anything that was a comfort. We didn't want to have a little stove or grill or heater. We didn't want to have a lamp. We didn't want any of those things, because all those things were just, in our eyes, ways that you're slowly getting comfortable and accepting your fate, and of being there on the street and staying there. We had a friend who had a huge tent with an air conditioner, with television, with everything you can imagine.
Wow.
Why would you want to move? We weren't looking for that. However, let me tell you, it didn't work. It doesn't matter what you do, because we also discovered that, I've expressed it before, there is no first step out of homelessness. It's literally it's a long jump. It's it's there. You can't reach that first step, doesn't exist, or the second or the third or fourth thing. I think it's about 10 steps you gotta leap over before you get onto the first rung, because there's so many problems. What I experienced were a lot of, I guess, uh, really good and or well-intentioned people from different agencies who tried to help, but they would do the first step. They do your intake, they sit down and talk with you, they tell you about all the things they have to offer, so forth and so on. And then typically you just don't hear from them again. And they say, oh, well, people move around. It's hard to find the homeless. We were in the same spot for 6 years, the same exact corner at 7th and Hobart. So I don't want to hear that excuse. I know it's not true.
So
Because
it's not you that moves around.
right,
It
we
might be
purposely did not move
them
because
here.
for me, when you move around, you don't have any roots, you don't have any community. And that's why we knew so many people in the area, because of those 10 years that we were homeless, we spent 6 of them in the same spot and
Wow.
really got to know the
It's
people,
really
and the people really
powerful.
got to know us. But you, there's a lot of fumbles in the handoffs that are supposed to take place between these different agencies, and that's what we experienced because
Yeah.
unfortunately the system isn't set up where someone can take you from start to finish to the process of housing. You start off with, one group comes out and they do an assessment, do your CES, do your SPDAT, and assess your priority. And then it's up to another group that comes out and does maybe interim housing. And then they're supposed to then pass it on to someone who does maybe bridge housing. And then they're supposed to
Yeah.
pass the ball yet again to someone that does, maybe your some sort of supportive housing. And well, each time there's the opportunity for a fumble. And at least in my life, every time the ball was fumbled.
Mm, yeah.
And that seems to be experienced everywhere because it's suddenly for whoever was helping you up to that point, it's no longer their responsibility. It's someone else who doesn't know you, and they're taking you on as a new case. And there's
You
just,
have to start all over
you start all
with the
over.
relationship, like who we are, where
Exactly.
we're at,
And it
with
just
our,
gets lost in the shuffle.
yeah, I
Um,
imagine.
the
Well,
other
we're
thing, if I could change is it wasn't until I got SSI that I was really even helpable. Um,
mm,
and if they get your document ready, get you your ID, get your social security card, make sure you've had proof of a TB test, and someone writing a letter to verify that you're homeless and so forth and so on. But if you don't have a source of income that's sufficient, then there's nothing they can do. Pretty much, they just leave you where you are, and you're sitting there. You've jumped through all these hoops. You've gotten document ready. You done everything they've asked you to do, and then you just languish, and then you're forgotten. What would be nice if they would help you find a way to get a source of income at that point, because that's what you need. For all of these low income housing programs, you need some source of income. Well, help us find part-time jobs. There's
yeah,
Chrysalis and other agencies that do that. It would be nice if they found, the jobs could be
yeah,
in the homelessness industry. It could be
right,
helping others. It could be cleanup. It could be helping bring food and water and things. But because people have no source of income, they're then stuck with there's nothing they can do at that point. But
yeah,
I've gotten ahead of myself because even once you do that, there's usually no housing. We focus so much on shelters and so much on bridge homes, but they're bridges to nowhere. There's nothing at the end of the bridge. We don't,
yeah,
the bottleneck is at the end of all of these different operations. I've run to so many people who've been in bridge homes and, they've got a 6-month window to be there, but they've been there for 2 years. They've been there for 2.5 years in a 6-month program because there is
yeah.
no housing to place them in.
Right. And I think
You
that's the heart, of this
Right.
solutions
So
oriented
we
conversations
we
that
have
we
we
want
have
to move towards. Yeah.
right. We put too much money on the temporary solution, and not on the back end of delivering, because the whole point of it is housing,
Yeah.
not to be
And
in
I
a
think,
temporary shelter. And what you see
right.
happening is, so a lot of the shelters have a 90-day window. So at the end of 90 days, a person's document ready, but they have no source of income, so they get dumped back out on the street. I can't think of anything worse than finally getting off the street,
Yeah.
being in a shelter, having a bed to lie on, a roof over your head, meals, hope that you're going to get housing, and then put right back where you were. That's to talk about
Right.
dashing hopes. And then
And
you wonder why people are service resistant. Well, once that's been done to you a few times, you kind of just say no. You know where
yeah,
it's going, and you don't want to do that. I can't
absolutely.
take that ride.
Yeah. And I think it goes back to what you had talked about, that there's like no one first step out of homelessness. And I think it's the same thing with the solution, right? There's a lot of us, a lot of advocates, a lot of policymakers, elected officials that have really, in good faith, really been thinking about what is the, we have multiple steps, right? Multiple access points. We can have a shelter improvement. We can have a street strategy. We can have temporary bridge houses, we can have tiny homes, we can have, but in the end, we need, as you're saying, supportive housing, which is really at the heart of the work that and
Right.
policies that we've been
We need
working with, like the newest, coalition we've been helping build with our future Los Angeles. How do we
right.
ensure we get to the housing numbers to ensure that people who are housed can stay housed, right? That we have
Right.
those tenant protections to ensure that people don't become homeless, especially now after,
Yes.
next month, that we don't know what may come of the temporary
And I
protections
and
we
I
have due to the pandemic.
and I hear people being put in, non-supportive housing where there's just housing, and then a month or two later they're back on the street.
Yeah.
Big surprise.
Right,
It's
because you need those skills, right? I
right.
think there
They
was
need the skills,
somebody that would share a
and
story that it's like somebody,
they may have so many other issues to address: medical issues, addiction issues, mental health
yeah,
issues, and those things are just left there. And suddenly, this person's supposed to manage all those things and maintain, and that's just not going to happen. There needs to be. Well, I'm looking here at your screen thing, and it's everyone in. Well, I think everyone needs to go all in. That's what needs to happen. When you get a navigator, there's all these different navigators. The navigator should have, their goal should be to take you from zero to housing, not to the next navigator, all the way to housing. And they shouldn't be able to get another client until they house you. Like they should have a certain number that they can hold, and until they house you and get you housed successfully, they can't have more. That's simple.
yeah,
So that then,
yeah,
and if they don't, then they lose their position, because
right,
it should, well,
yeah.
it is. I'm trying to formulate how to say this, but in the end, it is about results. We
How
talk
many
about
people?
in homelessness industry, we talk about, well, it's about, you make different contacts and interventions with different people on the street on a daily basis, and you're not held to any hard and fast numbers about how many you actually get into services, and or that you get to the end goal. Well, why not? Because for those people on the street, it is about that. It is about getting me to the end goal. It is about connecting me to the services, and there needs to be some sort of accountability. Or I'm glad that so many people have chosen to go into this industry, and to want to help others. But like any other industry, not everyone's good at it. And maybe there are other things they should be doing. I think we do need to have some sort of standards of success. And right now, LA is a perfect example of a city where there hasn't been, acceptable success in any of the
Yeah,
systems. We don't have the
yeah.
housing
And
available.
because we might, right, the housing available or like a concentrated, right? We are working on SB 79, which is an assembly bill that will help us build an entity that can help streamline and be a resource to ensure that we're getting the funding, the adequate funding, but also the equitable funding, that we're building housing throughout the county of Los
Right,
Angeles.
and from top to bottom, we've got so many issues. I mean, I hear these numbers. It doesn't matter if they're right or wrong. If they're close, they're ridiculous. That for each unit of low income housing, it's costing the city what, $560,000 to come up with a unit.
Yeah,
But meanwhile, hey, they could rent a house or rent apartment buildings that are in receivership for almost nothing, and not have to pay, nearly, that's over $500,000 per homeless person. That makes no sense to me. I've seen these, the tiny houses they've been building on different projects, at a cost of nearly $200,000. But meanwhile, I turn on my television and I watch them build a tiny house for $25,000. Right? Am I right? You
Right,
know,
we
and
can definitely
I'm watching, there's a show
be
called Tiny
using
Houses or whatever,
resources.
and they're building these
Yeah,
amazing ones for $25,000, but the city builds them for $200,000. Really?
yeah.
Someone is
So
getting, someone
yeah,
is
yeah.
really
What I'm
getting their
hearing,
bread
like
buttered.
yeah. And what I'm hearing as far as your recommendations would be like, we just need to be smarter about how we're using the existing resources, and
Yes.
also, build avenues where we could,
Yeah,
bridge a lot of the programs throughout the county and distribute funding, equitably where it's most needed, and for every part of the county to
yeah,
do its share and
we,
build the housing for the, for both our housing and our
and
low-income
we have,
renters,
we
as
have
well
so
as
many,
our unhoused neighbors.
we have so many underused resources in the city. I was amazed to find out how many apartment buildings in the city are in receivership and are operating with less than 50% occupancy. Well, I think those landlords would probably love to take homeless people who have vouchers or something, and at almost any cost, because it's incremental revenue. It's more than what they had, and they're about to lose their entire property because of insufficient tenants, and the city consider and pay for the tenants and do so at a much lower cost than building or by even renting, the hotel rooms. But we don't want to help those landlords because we'd be helping them stay in business, and they're not. It's just too many cross
Very lots of
political.
layers.
Yes, and we're worried about the fact that it would help them and what are they doing. It doesn't matter. We'd be helping the city. But that's just one example. Some things I've run across, with I managed to get a Section 8 voucher. That was May of 2019 when I was awarded the voucher, a COC. I didn't get it in my hand until November 7th, the day before I entered rehab. That's a long time to still stay on the, and I was still on the street the whole time. I had to get an extension immediately so we wouldn't lose it. And then once I got remember I said November 8th of 2019, it wasn't until June of 2020 that I actually got an apartment. So it's, they talk
Right in
about
the
it,
middle of the pandemic.
the process is just ridiculously long. And apparently it was like this before pandemic. And some people actually said to me, "Oh, that was pretty fast." I'm like, "What?" So much can happen. So many people can get lost through the cracks in that long wait. It's insane. And some of the issues I ran into were, for example, when you find an apartment that does take Section 8, they run your credit. And I was told by many of them that I didn't have good enough credit to get the place, even though I'm not paying the money. The majority of the money is coming from the government. The government's not going to bounce a check. These are HUD and Fed funds, that are going to this. But yet my credit was involved, and I had to actually,
Right.
fix my credit. And of course I had no credit. I was homeless for 10 years. Why would I have credit? Surprise, surprise. So it makes no sense to expect a homeless person to have good credit to rent, in order to rent an apartment, in order to use the money that's being given to him by the government to rent an apartment.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
well, I know we're coming to, I definitely want to make sure that I keep,
these are just some
don't
of the
want
issues.
to,
Yeah.
yes, so many, and I'm so grateful that that we do, and we want to focus on solutions as well. And it seems like we need a part 2 of you, Shawn, because I think there's so much, there's so much experience, and I appreciate your time, and I appreciate your thoughts, because I think you've been through it. We can probably spend like 5 hours on this conversation. So I'm really excited that we had this time, and that we can share, exchange these, right? It's not linear. There's so many ways we can take it, because there's so many layers of the homeless systems, the shelter improvements, all, we sit together on an advisory council. I mean, there's so many ways that we can begin to build on solutions, and it can't just be one way. It needs to be, all of us need to be on different tracks to really build the support we need.
In my opinion, nothing will get done unless we talk about it and someone hears it. And I think that's what we need to do. And,
Yeah,
and this is one of many conversations
absolutely.
that hopefully will help shape this narrative and let people know there are solutions
Absolutely.
possible. We just have to figure them out and put a little more effort into it. We need to treat people as human beings. We need to see them
Yeah,
holistically and try to uh,
absolutely.
work towards their entire being of making them whole again. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, I appreciate that reminder. And definitely we want more, we will have more of these live stream conversations because I think they're so critical and they really just help deepen our understanding of each other, of who we are seeing or not seeing on the street. And what the struggle is that it's not that easy. People must think like people just, like you were saying, people, it's hard living on the streets. So I wouldn't assume people want to be there. So, but it's not that easy, right? It's like people say, just why don't they get a job, right? That's a whole other conversation. I don't want to open that narrative, but as
Yes.
we just heard now, it's not that easy. So I definitely want to commend you for that, and would love to invite you to maybe do another conversation because I think there's a whole other slew. But we do invite everyone.
I would love to, because that
Yeah,
you posed the question just now. Why don't they just get a job? I could give you so many issues with the difficulties of that, and where would a person shower and change and dress? Where would they keep their clothes? So how would they get them ironed? How would they get a resume and actually keep it together so that it's not tattered and torn when they go to apply for a job? Where would they get a reference from? What would they use for their address, and who would vouch for them?
absolutely. That
There's
will
so
be
many barriers.
definitely, absolutely. That will definitely be, and we want to invite everyone maybe then to stay tuned for another. This will be a series that we want to be having these conversations. Hopefully, the part 2 will be with you, and then we invite other advocates that have been involved with our work on our campaign, who are maybe service providers, who are maybe experiencing homelessness. And so I am so appreciative. We do want others to get involved, so they can go to our website on everyonein.org. And Shawn, what a pleasure. Thank you for being
Thank
so
you.
gracious with some of the tech stuff in the beginning, but we are just so blessed to have you. And I wish you a very, very lovely day. And I look forward to, we will be continuing to work together and have more offline conversations, but I look forward to maybe a part 2 of this.
Okay.
So thank you so much, Shawn. Have a lovely rest of your day.
Thank you. I will. I'm glad to have been able to speak my mind, and I have a lot to say.
Absolutely. And we can go, and I don't mean to rush, but I want to be
Yes.
mindful of your time, but definitely would love, to continue this conversation. Have a lovely day. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Shawn.
All right.
Thank you everyone for joining us. Bye-bye.